Success isn't about getting the trophies. Success is about building relationships and being with people. My mom said something to me years ago, and I didn't know she was talking about me when she said this, but she says, you're supposed to love people and use things, not the other way around.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
In case you missed it,
what I'm about to share changed my life for the better 13 years ago when I first learned this solution myself. Now, I'm not talking about something crazy. I'm talking about writing an annual vision for the coming year, and that is the solution to making your resolutions, goals, and dreams come true.
Available everywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero, and he is an interesting one to be sure. Our guest today is a dynamic figure in the world of leadership development who's passionate about empowering others. He's a beacon of inspiration as he guides leaders towards unlocking their true potential to creating lasting change in their organizations and their lives. He's taught everyone from university students to CEOs as he's imparted his wisdom as a respected professor, seasoned entrepreneur, and passionate educator. He's humble, empathetic, and vulnerable as he's rooted his leadership principles in teaching others to do the same. He's built multiple companies from the ground up to success and knows what it takes to be successful. He's a transformative author who's transcended boundaries to foster both organizational and personal growth with a wealth of experience. Please welcome the authentic, humble host of the CEO podcast, Scott DeLong. Scott, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're so welcome. And just remember, it's your story. I just read it. So.
Yeah, it is my story, but it wasn't my story when I was growing up. I wasn't humble. I wasn't authentic. I was authentic, but I wasn't humble. I wasn't vulnerable, and I certainly didn't understand empathy. It wasn't something that we grew up with in my generation. Like I'm a boomer. I'm 63 years old, and we lived in this old command and control leadership style. Dad was the boss, the coach was the boss was the boss, and you just did what you were told. And, my mission is to change that dynamic, to get people that grew up like me to see things from a different point of view.
Yeah, and I can definitely understand that because growing up in, I'm a bit younger than you, 52, but growing up with the same type of leaders and the same environment, I mean, I've seen that my whole life and like you, working to change that. So I do want to dive into, of a bit of your story of how, you got to doing the work you are today. But before I get there, we have you on the show because we see you as someone that spreading positive change in the world because your actions have a positive impact on others, right? You're someone that we, by our definition, we call a social impact hero. And, it's an acronym, HERO, and we, might possibly get to that in our conversation. But the first question I have for you, Scott, and for all my guests on the program is, do you see yourself as a hero?
No, I don't use that word. I change agent, certainly, but hero, I'm not so sure that I would ever use that word. It's part of that humility piece. Again, I didn't have that when I was growing up, but it's really difficult for me to use strong words like that when associating with myself. So I wouldn't use it.
Okay, so let's talk about change agent, and thank you for your honesty there. So let's talk about change agent. So we'll use a little bit of your vernacular, a little bit of my vernacular. So every hero has an origin story, or every change agent, you didn't become a change agent overnight, kind of like you were saying. So, share with our audience how you can go back as far as you like, but how did you really get on the path to wanting to be a change agent, to wanting to, transform leadership and get on that path?
I think it started by wanting to transform myself. And this actually happened in a dream. I had a dream one night and it was vivid. It was a vivid dream. And I normally have dreams, but I don't remember them. But this one I remembered. In fact, it was so clear I could paint a picture of it. I don't have any artistic ability, but I can paint a mental picture of what this looked like. And if I can, I'll tell you a little bit about it. There was an old man sitting on a porch. Couldn't tell who these people were, but next to the old man was a young girl, 4 or 5 years old, just holding his hand and looking up at him. Off to the side, there were 3 men, 35 and 45-year-old, hanging out, just having a conversation, laughing, having a good time. And on the other side of the porch, there was a table with 4 chairs, and in the chairs were 4 women. One looked like it was probably the old man's spouse, maybe one of her sisters, a daughter, and even a granddaughter that were sitting there. And they were doing the same thing, having fun. I didn't recognize any significance to this, but I just thought it was a cool picture. Well, that image kept coming back to me in the form of daydreams. I kept seeing it. It just kept coming back. And I actually had another dream about it, and it was exactly the same. And I realized that this must mean something. And again, I didn't realize who these people were, but I finally registered that this old man was me sometime in the future. But I couldn't tell how old. I couldn't tell how long in the future. What I noticed about the scene was that these people, the old man wasn't handing out advice or candy or dollars or anything. They were there because how they felt in his presence. And that was so far from who I was at the time that I had no idea how I might get there, but I knew I wanted to. So it was a change I saw that I needed for myself. And it was some kind of wherever it came from, I don't know, but it came to me and I saw it and I knew that I had to go on a path to get there.
So that's fascinating, but how long ago was this dream again?
About 10 years ago.
About 10 years ago. Okay. So, you're younger man at that point.
Yeah.
And so in terms of, so let's talk a little bit, because I find it very interesting, everybody's journey. You can call it a hero's journey or not, but everyone's journey. So if this is about 10 years ago, so what was the path you were on? What was the path you were on prior to that? If it wasn't a change agent, what was your path then?
Chasing trophies. I grew up as an athlete, so I was always trying to win the next trophy, win the next game, win the next this, win the next that. Got into business, and the trophies became bigger. They became monetary. They became bigger houses and cars and boats and dollars and bank accounts and all those things. So I was always just chasing trophies and thought that that's what success looked like. That the more that I could acquire was successful. And so I was chasing trophies. And I did have people around me when I was giving out candy, advice, and money, but I didn't have people around me because of how they felt by being around me, right? So that was the thing. So that's who I was, and who I wanted to become was going to require something different. And again, I didn't know how, but there were some things that happened in my life all about the same time that probably all needed to happen at the same time. I joined a business group called Entrepreneur Organization. And in this group, it's a bunch of people, and mostly men, and mostly men in my age bracket, where we'd sit around and we'd share stories. We'd get vulnerable and we'd tell stories about our business or our life or whatever. I also went back to school at that time, and in the grad school classes, they're small classes where people share. Like there's a spark of a conversation, and then you share ideas on thoughts on that. And then there was something else that happened to us. My wife and I we went to Al-Anon and Nar-Anon meetings. We have some addiction issues in our family, and went there and I didn't think I was going there for me. I thought I was pretty strong. I could handle that, but I went there to hold her hand and be supportive. And soon I realized that it was for me. And the combination of these 3 things that had very similar completely different organizations and purpose for the organization, but they had similar styles where we'd be in small groups and talking and sharing. And this is where the principles came up that just struck me, and it kept showing up to me, and that was humility, empathy, and vulnerability. Things I didn't grow up with, things I didn't understand, but I realized, and the first one that I caught was in vulnerability, and that was in the Al-Anon and Nar-Anon rooms that we're in. What I found was that being vulnerable was the most attractive quality I could have. Being vulnerable brought people towards me. Mm-hmm. It didn't change my looks. I still look like this, but it was an attractive quality, and it was like it felt so freeing too, to be in a room where people would just look at you with loving eyes and accept you for your flaws, for your strengths, for all the things that you are. So that's really where it started. And again, had it not been for EO, school, and Al-Anon, Nar-Anon at the same time, I probably wouldn't have got it. I needed to be hit on the side of the head in order to get that. But those are the three things that struck me, in which I built the rest of my work around, which is, in the educational, going and getting the doctorate, was based on building trust. And I think these are three qualities that can help build trust faster and deeper than previously thought. And so that was my dissertation, is how to build trust in cross-functional work groups by using communication tools of being open and honest and vulnerable and authentic and empathic and humble, right? Mm-hmm. So I built my whole business around those qualities, and not just living them. I had to live them first and learn them and live them, and then teach them. And then the value of those qualities as well.
So what's super interesting to me, Scott, I appreciate you sharing the whole story. What's super interesting to me is how, you may not have realized it, but you were really creating the future of that dream, right? The future where the people wanted to be around you, as opposed to, they're there because, like you said, of money or status or something else. Yeah. So in that time period of going through that time period of change for yourself, right, with the three components, how long was that? How long was that time period of change?
It's not over. It's not over. I'm closer to being that old man than I was at the time. I'm not there yet, right? So I think that this whole success is a journey, not a destination, is part of it. And I can continue to be more vulnerable. I continue or understand vulnerability more, right? Brene Brown talks about vulnerability a lot, and it's a good quality, but vulnerability without boundaries is dangerous. Yeah. So understanding where the limits are and what makes sense and all of that's kind of important, and the nuances of that. Empathy, I don't think that people understand what empathy really is. I think empathy and sympathy get mixed up, and I don't know anyone that wants me to feel sorry for them. Yeah, true. But everybody wants me to understand them. Yeah. And to do the best I can to understand them. Now, I don't have their experience. I don't have their background. I don't have their consequences. So I may never fully understand them, but it is my goal to do the best I can to try to understand them and where they're coming from, not my interpretation of where they're coming from. So that's how I look at empathy. And humility is a little bit different. I don't look at humility as like, they say humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. My version's a little bit different. My version of humility is to recognize, and this is where my son taught me this, the one that had the addiction issues, is that every human being, all of them, have value. And I can learn something from all of them. For me, that's being humble. Yeah. To recognize and learn that or understand that I can learn something from every human being, and not just look down on others and that sort of thing, but be humble enough to learn their story and to learn what's important to them. I do like that definition, because the definition, it's similar to
or it connects to the definition that I like. And the Hebrew word for humble is anaval, which means to take up your God-given place in the world. And so what that tells me is that what your definition supports that. Your definition supports that everyone has value, supports that everyone can be, you can learn from everyone, and supports that, we're all in God's image, so we're all beautiful in our own right, whatever that looks like, right? And then when you throw in the empathy component, that helps you relate to others, and everyone at their at the base wants to be seen, be heard, and understood. And so if you can do those three things to another, then it's going to help you connect with them. And the vulnerability, what I find so interesting in vulnerability, because I've learned that, I had to learn that myself, growing up similar generation to yourself and similar time period, as a male, you have to be tough. And I was also an athlete and but still am actually, but you have to be tough and macho, and you can't show any weakness or emotion and everything. And so for many years I hid my emotion. But what I've learned is that, yes, people want you to be vulnerable, and it allows you to connect with others. And there is that balance though, because too much vulnerability without a relationship or without some kind of connection with the individual can be a turnoff. Like if you meet someone for the first time and they just start telling you their whole life story, and you're like, whoa, I just met you like 5 seconds ago. And so I think that's where it can get a bad rap, vulnerability. But I agree that it is an integral component of, building relationships and interacting.
I was fortunate because where I learned that we're in those rooms of the EO, the school, and the Nar-Anon. That's what it was about, right? So people were going to accept the answer. Have you just walk down the street and just start spilling your story? You just say, no, that doesn't work. So that's where Dr. Brown talks about having some guide rails on your vulnerability.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. So I have a question for you, and this may require you to be a little vulnerable, and I'm not asking it for that reason, but I'm asking it because it came to me as you were earlier when you said that, it wasn't that long ago that you started, realizing or started changing, and you're still in that process. Thinking back on your old self. Okay. So thinking back on this version of Scott that we'll call him 1.0, or the earlier version of Scott that was collecting trophies. And again, I was very similar, and am still a work in progress. Looking back on that version, do you like that version, or does it turn you off, or how do you view that version of Scott?
Yeah, I've always had high self-esteem, and I still see the value in what old Scott did, and right, because he felt his role was to help people win. Whether it's on the sports field or in the business world, didn't matter. My job was to win, and I wasn't going to let you beat me. I was the guy. You don't mess with me, because we're going to go down with this thing, right? And so I don't have a problem with my old version of me, but I do know that my definition of success has changed who I want to be. The change in the definition of success. Success isn't about getting the trophies. Success is about building the relationships and being with people. Success is about people. It's not about things. My mom said something to me years ago, and she was talking to the old Scott at the time. And I didn't know she was talking about me when she said this, but she says, you're supposed to love people and use things, not the other way around.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was such a cool line. At the time, I didn't know she was talking about me. She definitely was, right?
Yeah.
So, and I didn't feel like I was using people. I was, from my point of view, right, that I was trying to help people up and this and that, and build them up and make them better versions of themselves. And that's not my job, right? It's their job. My job is to provide insight, potentially, inspiration, hopefully, and set an example of the way I want to live. And if someone wants to live like that, they can ask some questions about it, right? We can talk.
Yeah.
But for me to change people is not, I say I'm a change agent, but I'm not there to change people. I'm there to provide them the tools that will allow them to make the changes, because I'm not going to change them. That's not what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
They'll change when they're ready, when they want to. But I can provide some tools, which is, kind of what my purpose is these days. And whether I'm coaching executives or teaching students or working with nonprofit folks, my job is to provide the tools, some understanding of that, and get the dialogue going.
So I have two comments on that. And I want to get to your purpose, because that's an important part of being a hero. The H in our acronym is honors your purpose. And so I do want to get to purpose, because you just touched on it. But before that, I want to ask this question, because this is something that I've struggled with as well. And, it sounds like you have. Being a coach for most of my life, and being a problem solver and a visionary and a leader, there's always been that balance, struggle of wanting to help others, as you said, become the best version of themselves. And that's language that I even use to this day, wanting to help them without seeking to change them. And as a parent, that's really difficult, because as a parent, you see, and, you mentioned your son, right, has had some substance abuse issues. And so you see a child making a poor decision, in your opinion. Yeah. And so that's where the desire for change, or the desire to, help steer them in a different direction, comes in. But like you said, they have to make that decision on your own. So how have you balanced that helping others become better without repelling them because they think you're trying to change them?
Yeah. There's something that I did in my life that has been probably the most positive impact of anything that I've done, and that I've taken the word should out of my vocabulary.
Interesting.
First of all, I think it's pretty arrogant of me for me to tell you what you should do. Again, I don't have your background, your experience, or the consequences of those actions. I know what I should do. I know what I would do. I know what I have done, and here are the results of those. So I have no problem sharing my experiences with people, but I've taken the word should out of my vocabulary. You should dye your hair. You should, I don't know, whatever it is that, and the only way I could get that out of my vocabulary is to attach the word arrogant to it. Because I've always been a confident individual. And when people called me arrogant, it hurt my feelings. I didn't like it, right?
Yeah, same.
So when I can relate to should means arrogance, it was easy for me to get that word out of my vocabulary, unless I'm talking about myself. I know what I should do. Or I believe I know what I should do, at least, right? But I just don't use that word when I'm coaching. In fact, when I'm coaching clients, I will never tell them they were wrong. I just won't. Mm-hmm. I'll ask questions to get them to realize or recognize what they could have done better instead of that. But they did what they did because they thought it was the right thing at the time, and it was the tools that they had available to them, and it was not wrong. Outcomes may have not been what you wanted. So let's explore how we can get some different outcomes. And I typically do that by asking questions rather than making statements.
Yeah. That's really good. And I can see how that, it puts people more at ease, right? It gets them where they feel safe. So they can be vulnerable and they can open up in that situation and be.
Yes. And more than that.
Yeah.
When they come up with their answer, they're committed to it.
Yep.
When I'm just giving advice, take it or leave it, all it's going to do is piss me off when they don't take my advice. So I don't do the advice thing anymore.
Yeah.
I think I have good advice, but I have good advice based on my experience and my history and my consequences, and all, not yours. So yeah. I'll ask questions for you to come up with the right answer for you, and then ask you how you're going to implement that. And that's really what all my coaching is about, is to help them reframe rethink, dive deep, and recognize that everything is 100% on them. Everything that they want is 100% on them. Mm-hmm. You know, I had a friend years ago say, marriages aren't 50-50. People tell you they're 50-50 and they're not. It's 100%. It's 100% on me to make this marriage better. Mm-hmm. Absolutely true. And hopefully my wife takes that same take as well, 100% on her. It's not 50-50. I have all this I have to do, whatever this is, right? The changes that I need to make. And I tell you what, when I working with some executives, the first few weeks when I'm telling them it's 100% on you, no matter what they did, whoever the they is, it's 100% on you. They don't like it. They're not happy with that. Usually about the third week we get together, the light bulb goes on. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can do something about this. I can inspire the change. I can't force the change, because if I force it, it is not going to be a true change. It's going to be people modifying behaviors so that they don't have to hear me bitch at them.
Yeah.
As opposed to making those true changes for themselves.
Yeah, lasting change. Because that's the saying that comes to mind is, the truth hurts in some situations, and then, it doesn't lead to that lasting change, that complete modified behavior. So,
and trust me, with the right questions, people will come up with these are rational human beings that have intelligence that can figure stuff out. They just hadn't thought about those questions. So if I ask a few questions and get them to reframe how they look at something, and they come up with their own answer, I see changes, the changes that the people are wanting to make for themselves. It's really simple, not easy, but it's simple and powerful.
Yeah. Who do you enjoy working with the most? Because, you do teach or lecture, and you mentioned like working with executives, but if you picked, who do you enjoy working with?
Well, that's a kind of a long answer again, but I started this work to get to the people that look like me, to get them to change. They want to. What I found is they like what I'm saying, but they're handing me off to the next generation that's coming up, that is like a vice president level, that's wanting to get to the C-level suite. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing a lot more work with vice presidents now to help them uncover some things that they can get to that next level. And what's interesting is my most successful clients, I'm talking about the top 3 that just got it, were all female. Now, I wouldn't have thought of putting some old white guy to help a young lady learn how to be something. But they speak the language that I'm talking. This vulnerability, empathy, humility, dependability, all those things. Women are better at that than men. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be misogynistic, but women are just better at understanding that than men. The problem is, in the business world, most of these vice president women had to be hard-nosed, tough to get to where they got. But it's also is what creates their ceiling, because nobody wants to work for that person.
Yeah, excellent point.
So one of the things, and this is really strange for a guy like me to be talking to women about using their femininity, and I'm not talking about flirting, and I'm not that, but their feminine traits. Mm-hmm. To overcome the barriers that are stopping them from becoming that C-level executive they want, because how they were taught to become a vice president was to drive, was to push, was to challenge people, was to be, there's a, now I'm not going to say the word, but there's a word that these people be that, and you will get where you want. And it got them to that level, but it won't get them to the next level. So those 3 women that have been able to get past that and recognize that, boy, those are strengths, not weaknesses, and that's what's going to get me to the next level. And those are my 3 most favorite clients ever. So somehow this crusty old dude got to these women, and it was great. It was just great.
Yeah, that's really cool, because, and it's so true, because when you think about, what you were describing, I mean, I've worked with some people and that does happen. They get to that ceiling because, and I think the bottom line, and, in this situation, it's for, for women, but it could really be anyone. the bottom line is that it's been in my experience, and I would love your opinion, Scott, is that I feel that in today's business world and today's leadership world, that what gets you to the next level and the next level and so on is that you are constantly evolving and is that you are constantly growing. And so what you were just describing in the simplest sense is stagnation, right? Is that they were this person and that got them here, just like you in your life, right? You were one person that got you to here, but then in order to evolve, you had to evolve and grow to go become, the next version of Scott. It's the same thing, right? It's
exactly the same thing. So that's people say lifelong learner. I'm going to say I'm a lifelong learner. I will again, even if it's the homeless guy on the street, that's someone that can teach me something. But I'm going to still read the academic journals, and I'm going to still read business cases and Harvard Business Review and all that, and talk to people. But I'm going to learn from wherever I can learn. And I learn not by talking, but by listening, right? I can talk all day long. That's, built into me. I can just keep going and going and going, but I learn more from listening than I do from talking.
Yeah. So true. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I try to, that's, without trying to change people, but that's some wisdom that I try to impart, saying, look, at my stage in my life and career is that, a piece of advice I can give you is just to continue learning, right? Don't let it stop when you're 22 or whatever age. Just continue learning, and then you will continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to go back and learn from all levels. I don't just have to learn from a group of CEOs. I can go learn from the janitor too.
Yeah. Right? From everyone, which is a valuable lesson. So you and I could probably talk about that for a long time, but
we could.
But in the interest of time, I do want to touch on one thing before we kind of wrap up here is your book. So your first book came out recently. I Thought I Was a Leader: A Journey to Building Trust, Leading Teams, and Inspiring Change. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, it really is a book about the principled leadership that I talk about, right? The beginning of it's a little academic, not too bad, but a little academic. It talks about different leadership theories, and you talk about the servant leader and the transformational leader and the authentic leader, and what's interesting about that those progressive leadership styles are over 40 years old, and we're still not doing them well yet. We're just getting there. They're 40 to 50 years old, and yet we still have a command and control leadership style in the business world today. Yeah. So I talk about the changes that need to take place, and it gets back into this what I'm calling now principled leadership, more so than even transformational leadership. It's a principled leadership, just not the principles that you thought. And those principles are all around vulnerability, humility, empathy, and dependability, which formulate what I call this circle of trust theory that we put together, that we could build trust not only faster but deeper by using this communication process. And the key to that is, why trust? Why does that matter? Because business is all about relationships. Humanity is all about relationships. And I've never seen a positive relationship built unless trust was there first.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. So, yeah, super important component. Well, thank you for sharing about the book. It sounds fascinating. We will put the link in the show notes, so we'll make sure
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
There's access to that, and they can go check it out. And I'm assuming it's on Amazon, so they can.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
You can purchase and write a review and everything, which is super important.
Please write reviews. We like
as a fellow author, right? A new book, you got to have as many reviews as you can. So yeah, for sure. Well, before we go, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest on the iSpark Change podcast. And Scott, I think you've done an excellent job of, whether you don't necessarily see yourself as a hero, you've done an excellent job of representing the components of being a hero, of honoring your purpose and engaging others in your mission and rippling your message to spread positive change and opening your heart to the world, being authentic and vulnerable.
Thank you.
So one thing we talk about on the program is our spark moments. And this is a term that we've coined on the show. that identifies those moments in life where actions have a ripple effect that goes far and beyond that initial act. So it could be a time where someone impacted you and that completely changed the trajectory of your life, or had a big impact, or something that you did impacting another individual. So share an example of what you would consider a spark moment where you didn't necessarily know that, it was a spark moment at the time, but, looking back, you realize that, it was pretty impactful either for yourself or you impacting someone else.
The one that comes to mind was a program that I put together. It was part of my master's thesis, actually, and it was a program called From Jail to Jobs. And I actually wrote this program, or built this program for my son. It didn't work on him because, one, I'm dad, and two, he wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. Well, I took this program into a nonprofit organization that deals with people that have recently gotten out of jail. And I got to sit in a room for 16 weeks with this group of guys, completely different culture than mine, right? They didn't live far from where I grew up, but the completely different culture than mine. And, we didn't cross that street with each other back then. After 16 weeks, only 2 of the original 10 people made it through the class. They, for whatever reason, other things got in the way, whether jobs or crime or whatever got in the way. I ended up hiring the 2 graduates for my company. And one of them, a lifer. This guy was a lifer. He was 45 years old, had been in for 25 years, 43 years old, been in for 25 years, and got paroled. This was the best employee I ever had.
Wow.
Associated with that, something else happened. This group asked me to come to their Christmas party, and it was a men's group. I think it was all men there at the time. So I went to the Christmas party and I asked if I could bring my son. And my son was only 16 at the time. Not the son with the issues, but a different son. And they said, sure, bring him. So we walk into this room full of former gang members, because that's what this was. As soon as I walk in, the pastor and the leader of the organization brought me to their table, and one of his sons took my son away. Like, this 25-year-old guy took my 16-year-old son. You're sitting with us. Like, oh crap! I was like nervous about that, right? Well, I didn't know it, but they asked me to speak. I wasn't planning on it, but they asked me to speak, and I got up and spoke and talked about the program. And when I got done, these 2 guys, these 2 scary dudes, came up to me and hugged me. All right? Story gets better. Drove home. I had separate cars with my son, so we drove home separately. And when I got home, I'm talking to my wife about the evening. My son comes into our room and sits on my bed. Now, that doesn't happen. 16-year-olds just to come sit on your bed to chat with dad, right? And I said, well, what'd you think? I liked it. That's not good enough for me. What'd you like about it? Mm-hmm. His answer was a change moment. He said, it made me think different. That's my change moment. My son thought different because he got to experience this event with guys that had nothing like him. He wouldn't have been in the same room. But that power of that night and getting to know these people one-on-one, like looking them in the eye and talking to them and recognize them, made him feel different. Different. Like,
that's awesome.
That's a change moment.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those, because those are definitely spark moments that you don't always know the impact that'll have until you see it later on down the road. So I really appreciate that. So before we go, our audience I know they'll want to learn more about you. So where's the best place for them to learn more about you and connect with you?
On our website, we have lots of information, lots of free stuff. That is just LEAD, L-E-A-D, the number 2, goals.com. leadtogoals.com. And you can find out about me. You can find out about our programs. You can find out about whatever you want. And I'm willing to take emails and phone calls from folks as well. So if you want to get in touch with me, it's scott@leadtogoals.com. Send me an email. I'm happy to reply. I love building relationships.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well so our audience can find it easily. So one final question, Scott, because our goal at iSpark Change is to positively impact 1 billion people, that's with a B,
Wow.
over the next few years through our community and our upcoming social impact social media platform. So we know we can't do this alone. We need the help of leaders like you to show others the way, because many people feel, as I once did, that they're too small to make a difference. So we value your thoughts and opinions as a social impact hero. So I want you to peer into the future, peer into our iSpark Change crystal ball here, and tell me, what can the world become if everyone starts becoming a change agent and feeling they can impact our future?
We can change. I'm just going to talk about the United States right now, because I think we're so dysfunctional in our political views right now, right? And even in my own family, my extended family, we don't talk about politics and religion at Thanksgiving. Yeah, let's do. But let's talk about it in a different way. Let's talk about it by trying to understand where the other people are coming from. And ask yourself this: why would a reasonable, rational human being think differently than me? If you start there, right, we can have those conversations, and we can start bridging those gaps that we have right now in the political world, in the business world, in the neighborhood, and then make it go out through everywhere, right? But we're so far apart politically right now that shutting them down, saying, I'm not going to talk to people like that, is the exact opposite approach that we should be taking. Listen to understand. Go back to what Stephen Covey said: listen to understand from their point of view. That will change the world.
Yeah, wise words. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. So, Scott, thank you for taking time today to share your heart and your wisdom with our audience. You came in, you over-delivered, as I expected you would. Your desire to be impactful is evident, and you're filled with passion, determination, and you lead with a humble heart, which tells me you will continue to have success in all facets of life, and this is only the beginning of your social impact. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Impact Heroes, it's our stories that connect us all, and we love hearing Scott's today. Scott DeLong, you're not only an inspiring and amazing human being, but you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. We'll see you all next time.
Do you want Rick to speak at your event? Here's what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
Performance made me feel some type of way. My name is Craig Siegel.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickcornelis.com to book him today.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments, and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.